Thank you so much, everybody. And I'm going to hand over to Simone. Welcome, Simone.
Hi. Just want to check. I'll start my slideshow. Oh. All right. Can everybody see the screen? Yep.
All good.
Yes. Oh, good. Excellent. Well, welcome. Welcome to the first McKillop Pond Management Group Media and Communications Workshop. Thanks for the introductions. I've actually taken a few notes. So when we go through, I have examples in all the sections, but we can talk about things that affect you guys who are actually in the session. So yeah, it was great to virtually meet you. I really want to thank the supporters, the Limestone Coast Landscape Board, which was supplied the funding through the Australian Government National Landscape Program. As Meg said, I'm Simone Smith, and I'm going to take you through the next couple of hours and then through the next 2 sessions after this. Today, go for about 2 hours. We're going to have a break in the middle for a cup of tea and a stretch, so don't panic there. But I'm actually really looking forward to it because communications and agriculture are 2 of my favourite things. So I'm hoping we can all have a good time and learn a few things today. So communication, something often taken for granted and overlooked. And it's not really thought about until something often goes wrong. When it does, it can be quite ugly. Let's be honest. But it's something that holds, I liken it to the glue in businesses, industries, even relationships, if we're getting pretty serious. Like I'm sure, like a lot of you guys said, you work in extensions, so you have clients and customers. You know, I'm guessing you need to tell them, you know, how important your product is, your service, whatever. It's all about communication. And in my role, I've seen the best and the worst of communication. There's sometimes I actually get quite disheartened because you see some amazing agricultural research, for example, top notch, world leading, that sort of thing. But because the message just doesn't get out there, it's not communicated well, or, you know, for a variety of things, it doesn't actually get on farm the way you would hope. And so you're sort of missing out on a few of the benefits. I'm trying to right a few of those wrongs through different jobs that I do, but yeah, I guess time will tell how that works. So today I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. For as long as I can remember, all I wanted to be was a journalist, but I didn't want to be any type of journalist. I loved the farm. I wanted to write, and I wanted to write about things that mattered to me and that I cared about. Plus, as a youngster, I was pretty addicted to the adventures of Superman. I'm not sure if anyone remembers that on telly, and Lois Lane. Her life was so exciting as a journalist. So I was like, yep, bring it on. I also used to write at school newsletters. I liked to keep people informed, know what was going on, and I'd write newsletters about the local footy and netball results. So Port Macdonald, and if anyone's familiar with that area, go Demons. But yeah, I studied journalism at uni with some agricultural subjects, and yeah, sort of never looked back. Ag journalism has taken me around the world. I've been super lucky. I've been to the boardrooms of ASX companies. I've seen collapse of companies, reported on them. Not so much fun, but a big learning curve. You know, I heat sprayed cows while milking and interviewing farmers in the Riverina. Like I've ridden a horse in a protest. I've spent countless hours around kitchen tables. Yeah, I've been all over Australia as well. I really love it. It's for me, it's a good way to learn about an industry that I love, but it's also a good way to tell some wonderful stories. I've also started my hand at starting my own business, as Meg alluded to. I work for a number of different organisations writing stories for them. I do a bit of teaching in terms of these types of workshops, and quite a bit of photography and a little bit of social media. I noticed in your introductions, a lot of people said they were keen to hear about what social media. That's to come in the next session. Today, we are fundamentally focusing on the purpose of your communications, which I think is the building blocks, plus the writing style. Now, these 2 things actually underpin every other piece of communication you do, whether it be social media, whether it be an interview, whether it be a newsletter. Like, these are your building blocks, and then as the time goes, we'll build on it with the other aspects. So today, I really want to equip you to use some tangible writing, editing, content planning skills to improve your communication. But like everything in life, it does require practice. Today, we're going to have 2 tasks. The first one we'll be doing during the session, and the second one is homework. I'd like to say I'm sorry about the homework, but I'm sort of not, because practice really is the key. And especially with writing, it's the more you do it, the easier it gets, the more the things that need to be included become second nature. So that'll all be emailed out by Megan from McKillop. So you'll get all that on your emails, no need to panic. And I'm always here if you'd like to email me if you have any questions. So what to expect from today? I don't really want to be just talking at you guys for a couple of hours. So I'm keen for it to be interactive. I've got all your names and everything down here, and I know a little bit about you, so I might call on you to help me answer a few questions. Please don't be shy. The good thing about writing and communications, and this is why I think I particularly love it, is there's actually no right or wrong. There's slightly better, slightly worse, you know, it's not black and white. So, you know, please feel free to have your thoughts. You know, some of you guys might have observations about the different things that I haven't even picked up myself. And that's really good, because at the end of the day, you're agricultural, agribusiness professionals, farmers, those sorts of things. That is your line of work. You guys are experts in that. As the poll said, a lot of you already work in communications. So I'm just going to hope to add a few strings to your bow. And yeah, we can work together and get some stuff done. So if you have any questions, chuck it in the chat box. Meg will let me know. And yeah, feel free to stick your hand up, anything during. So why work with the media? I would say, why not? But in all seriousness, if there isn't panic buying at the start of the COVID-19 in Australia, the stripping of supermarket shelves proved anything, it pretty much proves that everyone values food. Therefore, everyone pretty much values agriculture, undeniably. So ag is also really big business, and the media are interested in what big business are doing, and particularly the business that feeds and clothes us. But people don't always understand agriculture, and that's sort of where the communication breaks down. So ag has a wonderful story to tell on so many levels, but you know, it's about people being willing, able to communicate this story so that everyone understands and can enjoy it. Now, media also provides opportunities for agriculture itself, and I've popped a few on the slide there for everybody to have a look at, but it goes both ways. And I know many of you guys would have heard about the time social license. It's being used a lot now. That's a huge issue. No matter what lobby group you listen to or anything in the papers, you know, talk to people. But media is one way that you can bridge the gap between the consumer, farmer, okay? That's all going to help in terms of social license going forward, getting people to understand, basically getting to hearts and minds of the voting public by telling our stories. So there's a great opportunity for publicity now, and I've popped some not particularly nice stories up there as an example, but COVID-19 has really hit the media industry. Unfortunately, media was an industry that had been suffering anyway due to a decline in advertising, things going online, Facebook, Twitter, you know, you name it. So revenue had to come by even before the pandemic, and for some organisations, the virus unfortunately has been the last straw. So for those who are still printing, and you know, I just read an article this morning in Queensland, there's a couple more community papers starting up. So these are all great news, but for those that are still existing, starting, whatever, a lot of them are cutting costs, or running on the smell of an oily rag. So the reporters there are now busier than ever, and this provides a really good opportunity for those people who can provide well-written, clear, newsworthy communications, lovely pictures, you know, good interviews, all the things we're going to go through in these 3 sessions, and particularly about the local region, because, you know, I don't know if people notice that the papers and the communication of media that's suffering is those in the region. So, you know, agriculture has a role to play in helping these out. So the key to getting your stuff in the media, though, is making them read and notice it. And that goes for if you have, you know, a newsletter yourself and you want your members to read it. Just to put this in perspective, and I've included this meme, is when I was at the Weekly Times, I'd come into work on a Monday and I'd have about 250 emails in my inbox. Daily, I'd get between 50 and 70, and depending on what was going on, you'd get over 100. So I'd hate to think how many you'd be getting at the moment with all the media briefings about COVID. But when I left the paper, I had 15,000 unread emails in my inbox. So what I'm trying to say is daily, there are so many organisations competing for a reporter's attention. And so over these next 3 sessions, I want to give you some tips, some tricks on how to give yourself the best chance of getting their attention. And that goes to say if you're communicating with your farmers, your members, whoever as well. Same principles apply. Okay, so where do we start? Like everything in business, you actually need a plan, and it's best to start at the beginning. So I put together this not so pretty, I guess, table, but for me, I like to think of the questions that you ask, and then I like to think of, basically what it boils down to. So I've got your examples there, and under the truth thing, it's pretty much summarized in a couple of words what you're really looking at. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people and organisation businesses that communicate without purpose. Now, I know a lot of work goes into communications, and I'm sure those people who ticked in the poll that work in communications will know, and some of it doesn't work, some of it does work. I'm starting here with defining your audience and your purpose, purely so you can get the most out of that effort you put into. So before you even put pen to paper, I want you to think about those questions on the screen, okay? And I want you to keep in mind, particularly with your audience, that the audience could change with each piece of communication you do. Now, nobody knows your audience better than you. It's the people you're working with, the people you want to work with, and perhaps the people you had worked with who maybe no longer work with you. I don't know, it depends what you're doing. But if you actually don't know your audience, how they consume media, how they consume information, just ask them. It's best to be upfront. Even just say, look, I'm thinking about making some changes to our community newsletter. How would you like to have this received? It really is as simple as that. And the best way to craft communications is by starting to communicate. Now, the other parts I've got written up there, such as the hook, so what's in it for the reader and the audience, the credibility, why they'll listen to you or your organisation, and the call to action we're going to go through in the next few slides. So the hook itself is probably one of the hardest pieces of information, hardest pieces of communicating. And I know, like, I get stumped with it sometimes. I know a lot of my colleagues get stumped with it. It's that bit that makes you want to read the story, or want to look at the Facebook post, or want to read the Twitter, or want to open that newsletter, or whatever it is. It's that hook. So we're going to go through some tips to get that, and examples of different calls to action as a way to develop your purpose of your communication. So with that in mind, let's take a look at the first one. So the call to action is to do something. Basically, you're urging, I like to say this, we are the expert on this topic. This is what you should be doing. Now, I've got the COVID safe mask one, which is probably a little bit out of date now, given masks have become the end thing, but this was earlier in the month, where it was pretty straightforward what they were asking: wear a face mask. The credibility, why we should be listening to this, comes from the fact it was stamped with the Australian Government and Health Department. And the why you should be doing it, so, what's in it for them? The hook. Well, there's a global pandemic for starters, and you want to protect yourselves and your family. I've also put another example up here from the Australian Fodder Industry Association, which is one of the organisations I work with. And this one's quite blatant with what they want people to do, but I thought it would be a good example of explaining this. So what they said, now is the time to plan for spring fodder stocks. This came out in autumn. Why do you do it? Because it's a drought mitigation strategy. Just been through drought, it's front of mind. Everybody's still thinking about how hard that was, what it was like, how hard it was to get hay, etc., etc. Okay, the credibility comes from the fact that it's the industry organisation, and it goes through and explains a few other things. But what I'd like to do, and I think Meg has this in the box, is that I'm going to give everyone about 30 seconds, minute or so to scan over the land care article, the press release. And then we're going to work through the different aspects of that. So if we can get that up, is that possible?
I've just popped that into the chat box, so you'll hopefully have seen that pop up in your chat box down the bottom. If you just jump in there and click on the link, it should take you to that site with the media release in it.
Thank you.
And let us know, please, if that hasn't worked or if you're having trouble accessing the site. We also did think about putting some theme music in here while you were all reading, but we sort of decided against it.
I was just warning you too, there'll be a few exercises where you have to read some stuff and answer some questions. All right, I see a few people finished. We'll scoot on. Okay, I've got some suggestions in there about what the hook is to that land care article. Personally, I think the hook was the fact that it's a leap year and that we've also had the bushfires. Does anyone want to have a stab at perhaps why they're the hooks? Unmute yourselves and perhaps have an answer or something in the Q&A box. No, maybe.
No one's being very forthcoming, Simone.
All right, I'll kick us off.
Yeah, Tim here. It's to do with time, basically. People are always time poor. Use the extra day.
Love it. Love it. Thank you. And the good thing about a leap year and having an extra day is it actually appeals to everybody. So you've got a really big audience there, so it's a winner. Yep, time poor. I put bushfires in simply because the coverage was absolutely everywhere. It was devastating. You also might know someone who's affected. And even if you don't, like, it's hard not to, feel the feels when it comes to bushfires. So we're going to take a look now at the credibility. I love this line that I've put in here. Credibility comes with the Landcare brand itself. Like, who doesn't love someone who's into planting trees, right? But this line, after the first response during a natural disaster, local land carers are there for the long term. So they're helping people who've been in a natural disaster. Oh, aren't they really good, right? They're also there for the long haul. Like, they're in it for a really long time, so they're committed. Okay, so therefore, you're getting this sense of that's why they're allowed to talk about this, because not only are they good, they're a good organisation, they're good people, they know about it. They're there doing the work. All right, we'll chuck down to call it to action. Say, as Tim pointed out, you've got your extra day to plant a tree, but fundamentally the underlying recruitment is for land care groups. And if you were to join Landcare, you would have that same credibility and that same, good feeling that we went through before. So I've got another call to action here. This is a press release from the National Centre for Farmer Health. It arrived in my inbox last year when I was filling in for ABC Rural in the Victorian Country Hour. I love this press release for so many reasons, but and I actually did a story based on it, and it was run right across the country in the different country hours. So we can take a quick look at this release, and remember, we're looking for the hook, the example of credibility, and the call to action, please.
And I've just popped that link for that media release into the chat box again. So again, jump in there and click on it, and it should take you directly to the website.
Thank you. All right, I'll give everyone sort of another 15 seconds or so. All right. go to this next table. So we'll break it down. So I've got a couple of examples here. So I'll start us off with, the hook, credibility and call to action. Does anyone want to take a stab at why landmarking time might be a hook? No?
Feel free to unmute yourselves and
that's all right.
And
we're just
volunteer.
We're warming up. Okay, so it's a practice. It's a farming practice that's common across many farms. So it's a lot of people can relate to it. So we can use that as an example. Then an example of credibility I put there. The National Centre for Farm and Health. The name itself has quite a good name and is quite recognisable. And the call to action, fundamentally, don't be complacent about needle stick injuries. I have a few other examples here. So starting with the hook, I personally believe the needle stick injury itself is a hook. Like, how common are they? It's something many people can relate to. I know I've had a close call needling cattle, and I think, oh wow, okay, needle stick injuries is a thing. Like, the other thing is the fact that they mentioned doctors in the first line. Like, what does a human doctor have to do with landmarking? It's that little bit of intrigue that perhaps could make you want to read it. All right, down to the next one, credibility. The discussion about reference groups suggests the organisation has not only done the research to validate its call to action, it also has proof. Now, there's a statistic in there, and everybody loves a good statistic, but that 80% have had a needle stick injury. So, a statistic is really valuable for credibility, especially if it's an independent statistic, okay? But this statistic here, they've explained, has been come about through the research. It's done the reference groups with people who get needle stick injuries. So they're saying it's pretty well there. But the bit that caught my attention, and it goes down to the call to action, is it was towards the bottom, and it was the thing that said, take the material packaging to the doctor if you get an injury. So what it was saying is, if you happen to jab yourself with a needle by accident and go to the doctor, number one, well, to start with, you should have been, you've got to make sure you're really careful. This can be quite dangerous. If you happen to do it, go to the doctor and then take the whatever you're needling them with in. And, this is actually what I led the ABC story with, because it's their call to action. And it's a way, it's pretty obvious really when you think about it. Like, but it may not have occurred to everybody. Like, it didn't occur to me, could have occurred to you guys. You guys, a lot of you farm for a living, but it's a call to action that's firstly tangible, it's easy to understand, it's relatable, and it's backed up by credibility, and it can apply to so many different people. So you've got a number of different things working in your favor there for some pretty good communication. All right. Here's another call to action: to think something, to feel something. Now, this is a favourite of animal rights groups and politicians. They love the emotive language, the pictures. They want to make you see yourself or your family in the situation, and they're appealing to your senses. But farmers can operate in this space too, and agriculture. Now, this is the only picture I could find online, so I'm apologising in advance. But if you can happen to see it, it's a picture of a billboard, which was part of the National Farmers Federation campaign that ran at the start of the COVID-19 lockdown, when everyone was panic buying. Like, it could have equally have put some toilet rolls on the screen here to explain the context in terms of time. But the reason that I love this campaign so much is that it said, don't panic. For starters, it was a time where everybody was panicking. So we're telling you, don't panic. And not only does don't panic coming from a farmer is a credible thing, every time they do the trusted list of occupations in Australia, farmers are always up the top. As a journalist, I'm always down the bottom, but let's not talk about that. But yeah, they're saying don't panic from these really trusted people in Australia. And then they were also playing at the working from home. So we're experts at working from home. So it's giving you that reassuring people that they will get food. Farmers are good at this. They're used to this situation. They're here to feed us all the time. the reassurance during a super duper stressful time. I loved it. It was straight to the point. And yeah, it was making me think or feel something. I wanted to feel reassured, feel secure. Okay. So let's break down one of them. And I've chosen people for the ethical treatment of animals one, just because they use a few different techniques that, well, mostly because they're very obvious with how they use them. So there's a media release here that I'm hoping you'll be able to go into the chat box, please. So
already done. And Danny has just said in the chat box that she thinks the trust for farming has dropped down now and we're about the same as lawyers.
Oh, that's interesting.
And Simone, I think we
Why is
might give
that?
everybody a little bit of extra time to read this one. I reckon the last one was quite long. I think maybe people didn't quite get through the whole thing.
Sure, no worries.
Why have we dropped? I think because we started using a bit too much science to communicate, and we're not actually putting forward some of those human values, for example, like the NFF were doing. Yeah, apparently that's the latest. So it's not good.
Well, thanks for that, Danny. Just as well you're here, because we're going to talk about how to do that and how to basically uncomplicate complicated messages so that they appeal to the greater good. Because that's sorry, I'm talking over the reading time, but that was one of my biggest bugbears, because I grew up on a farm. My family are farming. I love it, but it just really bothered me how people didn't understand it, but then they couldn't understand it because it was often explained so complicated, or in the sense of, oh, you wouldn't know, you're not a farmer, or, or so patronizing. So if we can lift our communications and work with what we've got, we can do it. And the NFF, I love that campaign so much. Like, I can't, it was just brilliant. So yeah, thanks for that, Danny. Oh, be quiet. How's everybody going with their reading time?
Perhaps just unmute yourselves if you need some more time. Just tell us that you need some more time. And David, I've noticed you've put your hand up. Do you just want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yeah, I was just going back to the previous couple of slides in terms of the call to action, Simone, and I'm interested in your comments about, I guess, positive or negative calls to action. So some of them said, do this, and others said, please don't do that. Mm-hmm. Which of those are used where, or have you got any preference, or what are your thoughts?
It depends on what you're trying to communicate. For example, if it's a safety message, don't do this because we care for you and we don't want you to be injured, or you're grain growers, and I'm actually using an example of a grain growers media release in a minute as a good example. But perhaps it could be around storage of grain. Don't do this because this happens. Please do this. But if you've got a positive call to action, you've got to do this call to action and don't do this, I generally always generally start with the do, unless it has, and we're going to go through hooks and stuff in a second, it has a big impact. This is just going to be one I'm making up off the top of my head, for example, David, but don't, could be really extreme. There could be some really good research that comes out that says, don't store grain in X, Y, and Z silo. And everyone might, 60% of grain growers might have that sort of silo. And so you could start with that, because that would have the impact, because people would be like, oh, I've got one of them at home. Why is that the case? And then you're like, store it in this. But then you've got to put the credibility in. Well, why don't you store it in that silo that I've just spent a lot of money putting in or putting up, or I've had for years? So they can work together, and they can be in the same one, but you've got to lead with one, not the other. And then you can include them both, but, simple which we'll go through in a second. Does that help you answer it?
Yeah, it does. And I take your point about the seriousness of what it is that you're doing. I mean, the one that springs to mind immediately are the drink driving ads where, don't drink and drive, rather than please be a good boy and don't drink too much. And if you do, get a taxi home. That's...
Yeah. Yes, that's a perfect example. Yeah. Yeah, thank you for that. That's a really good example. All right, we'll go to the next slide, if that's okay. So we're breaking it down. So there's a few images and videos in that. Does anyone in fact want to take a stab at perhaps why they hook us in?
And please just unmute yourselves and let us know. You've had a fair bit of time to read that one, so you should all be brimming with ideas.
It's making or it's presenting sheep like people.
Bang on. Yep. 10 points for David.
Which, unless anyone hasn't noticed, they're not.
They're not, yeah. Yeah. You hit the nail on the head there. I've also got written here, they're cute. And if anyone noticed, it's looking straight at you. So it's like the engagement of the eyes, which when we go through the photo section in the next lesson, we'll be talking about faces or papers. But it's the same principle with animals too. They're looking at you. And yeah, relating sheep to humans. Humans want to have fun. We all know someone who's a picky eater. What about the idea that sheep can be optimistic when they look bleak? Don't know about that, but they're having a crack. So it's placing as David said, placing the human emotions onto the sheep, and it's promoting the feels. Pretty much, if you're reading that, you're trying to get the feels, and they're trying to get mid-ground. Yep, get people to feel for the sheep. And I guess perhaps they're trying to get people to read that and think, oh, well, I feel the same way about sheep. I don't like Brussels sprouts, for example. I'm a bit of a picky eater, so are the sheep. Oh, I might start wearing synthetic fibers now and not wear wool. It's appealing to emotions for that reason. It's finding the common ground. Now, if we're going to go to the next one, we're going to have a look at the credibility. So I've got down here dot points, the fact it was in a book, and the use of the term facts. Does anyone want to take a stab at perhaps why they could be credibility? All right.
I'm speaking. I'm going to pick on somebody because I think that they all know, but they're just not keen to unmute themselves.
It's Danny here, because if it's printed, it's more believable than if it's in a Facebook post, basically.
Yep. And if it's in a book, well, a book's even more believable. I'm not saying this is true. It's just the perceptions they're playing to people's ideas.
And it sort of implies that someone's, spent a bit of time on it and they've done some research and they've published this book and, yeah.
Exactly, David. That's really, really good. And the fact that they keep using the term facts, if you don't know anything about it, I know I'm preaching to an agricultural crowd, but if you don't know anything about it, use the term facts. You're like, oh, okay, that's true, even if it's not. I put dot points in there because, well, the dot points and the numbering system, easy to remember, easy to digest, easy to read, all those sorts of things. And the last one, I guess, is the call to action. Fundamentally, it's to boycott wool, but I guess the other one is to buy the book Animal Kind. Now, awareness. Basically, this call to action is they want you to know that they are doing something, but it has to be doing something that's value to you. Otherwise, where's the value? Now, I've got an NFF newsletter up on the screen. It's a perfect example of a call to action of awareness. It's like, hi members, you pay your dues, you're part of this. This is what we are doing for you. This is important to you, and this is what we're doing to help you. Now, we're going to go through an example of a grain growers media release. So that, I think Meg's going to put that in the box. Thank you.
Should be in there for everybody to jump on. Yeah.
And it's a shorter one.
We might just give you a minute or so to read it through.
Meg, mine's actually taken quite a while to load. I don't know whether anyone else is still waiting for theirs to load.
Okay, we'll just give you a couple of minutes to make sure that you've been able to read it. Just yell out everybody or anybody if you can't access it or if you're having trouble getting it to load.
How's everybody going?
So mine still hasn't
Danny?
loaded yet.
Good. Yeah. Cool. All right. So we're looking for the credibility call to action. We'll skip to the next page because I've got a few of them here. But I'd really love it if anybody can point out perhaps why they think this is the case. And when we've got the hook to start with, I'm going to take you to the second point. Did anybody look at the date of the release and the reference to the instant asset write-off time? So why do you think that could be a hook?
I'm going to call on somebody because we're not having anybody volunteer. So Bonnie.
So the date, like, it makes it seem like it's current and it's like a recent, yeah, it's up to date and it's not just something that they've put up on the website, you know, a year ago or a couple of months ago. It's like, yeah, it's current. Sure, yeah, that's exactly true. And at the time of the release of the media release, as you're coming to the end of tax time, you know, there's a lot of talk, you know, the government was talking about it possibly extending the instant asset write-off. And for those people who work in agriculture, you know, that can be quite a favourable policy. And so, not sure if anybody caught it last week on the news with the quad, last week or the week before, with the quad bikes and the fact that there wasn't a lot of them around. Some of it's to do with the new safety legislation, but a lot of those sorts of purchases were being made to make the most of the instant asset write-off time. So purchasing big pieces of machinery were at the forefront of people's minds at that particular time because of what was happening in a broader context. And if you're purchasing a large piece of machinery, obviously, you know, it's a big asset, right? So you definitely want the best protections for those purchasing that part of the equipment. Like, that is really front of mind during this time. And so we're going down to the next bit, the credibility. I'll jump, you know, grain growers, large membership, recognised voice for farmers. Everybody knows the sign in agriculture, the logo in agriculture. But I love the term, they are calling for the government to do something. What sort of does that invoke? What sort of credibility does that invoke? Does anyone want to have a stab at that one?
Yeah, if no one else wanted to talk.
Please.
Well, it means that they care about their members.
Yes. Yes. Good point. It's really great, Megan. Yeah. You know, we know our members, we know what they want, we know what their issues are, but we're in a position to call for the government to do something. So we are that big, we are that important that the government is going to listen to us when we call for them to do something. So it's giving this idea that, you know, the government will listen to them. We are big, we are powerful, we are working for your members. Okay? In that respect, they've done a really good job. I think this is a great release. And the call to action, obviously, it's the awareness. We're looking after our members' interests. So whoever put that one together, David, did a really good job of communicating.
I'll pass that on to Shana, my boss.
Yeah, I've met her a few times. It's fabulous. So the good thing about agriculture communication is that pretty much everything impacts the business bottom line. This is something that I absolutely love about it because for two things, it's always reminding me how big and important agriculture is to the global economy, the Australian economy, all that sort of thing. But I've got an example of weather, I've got diesel, I've got the economy, we've got, you know, science, health, anything. It's pretty much hard to name something that can't be linked to agriculture or have an effect on agriculture. And I always used to play this game with the young cadets when they'd start at the paper and get them to name something, and we'd have to work out how it could possibly affect agriculture or a farm business bottom line to identify a hook. So just in case you were wondering, and I feel like I am ramming the point home, in agricultural communications, everything can pretty much be linked to the bottom line of a farm business. So if you're looking for a hook, this is sometimes the first place you can go. Now, with that grain growers one we just looked at, they were referring to purchasing of machinery or purchasing of machinery, spending money, investing in a business. They use the hook of this bottom line business, agriculture. And sometimes, you know, when you've got this hook, keeping in mind the hook is the reason someone wants to read your story, the reason they want to read your newsletter, the reason they're going to look at your social media post, all that sort of thing. Okay? So, how to identify a hook? Now, this is tricky, and I said at the start, it is one of the hardest things to do.
Sorry, Simone, it's Danny here. Can I come back to that?
Yeah, do you want to go back to the next page?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But for me, that final paragraph, the grain growers had recently heard where a grower purchased a self-propelled boom spray. Shortly after the purchase, he encountered electronic issues with the machine that are still to be resolved. Now, to me, that's more about not being able to use what you had, and the inconvenience is the hook rather than probably the money.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true. But inconvenience, inconvenience, I would say, can cost you money.
Yeah.
So if you think of it, and I know a lot of it, time is money.
Yep.
Paperwork is money. I know this has been quite harsh about business, but if you have to take it back to get prepared, or you have to go to court, which I've heard about boom sprays recently going to court, if you have to engage a lawyer, that's all time out of you doing your business or you doing what you want to do. So yes, it is an inconvenience, but fundamentally it's costing a business. So
if I could just endorse that, I've been involved in doing quite a lot of the background work behind that media release in terms of, you know, talking with growers and writing case studies and that sort of stuff. Yeah. And at the end of the day, whilst it is inconvenient, it is also about the money, because you know, you've got that timeliness cost of, I didn't get my crop sprayed on time. It went, you know, a tonne to the hectare less than someone else's. It's pretty easy to quantify. Yeah,
that's correct. And Danny, the inconvenience is a hook you can go to as well. Like I said at the start, there's no right or wrong, right? Because that is true. Inconvenience is a pain in the butt. So, but yeah, you've got that option of both. But I always put in money because it is something that affects everybody, whether they like it or not. So yeah, good pickup, really good pickup. Thank you, and thanks for the explanation, David, with the context. I'll go back forward. Sorry. Okay, so we've got the hook, right? How to identify a hook? Now, just imagine your clients, your members of media, they're fish, and they're swimming through their inboxes and newspapers and newsletters, and what's going to catch their attention? What's the story equivalent of a juicy word? That's what I always say. Now, impact is the first thing. You know, something that's going to have an impact on them, right? There could be a number of things I've written on the screen, but I'm just going to use one example. New pain relief product for livestock, for example. Like I know in Victoria now you can't mules without pain relief. That's a motive. You know, no one likes being in pain. No one likes their livestock being in pain. And, you know, there could be some advice around that. There could be some insight. So is there trials that show positive impacts on business for using this product? But equally, there could be trials that show a negative. So just because something's not a good result, it's basically back to that call to action, what not to do. So just because it hasn't worked out great doesn't mean it's not news. The news is don't do this. So, you know, that's just one example of an impact hook. So you're looking at what's in it for them. Another one that can help you identify a hook is timeliness. So what's happening now? So last harvest in the southeast South Australia and Western Victoria, and we've been very lucky, so I apologise to Stuart, who's calling in from Wagga, but we had a ripping season, and I know other people did too, but we were almost too wet, for example. There was a lot of hay that was being cut. There was issues around curing times, all that sort of thing. Timeliness hook could be, well, lots of people have hay. Are more people looking to put hay sheds up, for example? Are more people thinking about storing hay? The best way to store hay caps go on the top maybe. And, you know, the hook there could be the fact that hay stored correctly better maintains its value. So if you're going to put all the money into making this hay, making the most of your excess feed, how about you store it correctly and it keeps its value better? So, you know, that's a timeliness hook of what's happening locally. Currency. Now, the best example I can think of with this one is bushfire preparedness. We see this every year without fail, and unfortunately it ticks a few of the hook boxes, you know, impact, prominence, currency, and sadly for some people it can be proximity. It could have happened in your backyard. But bushfire is something that, you know, what is happening? It's happening here, it's happening at this time, we have a fuel load, we're going into summer, okay? Everyone can relate to that. I've popped in this one on the slide, downtime on farm. And the reason I popped that in it is because when it's not so busy, it's a really good time to talk to clients or members or whoever, or even bring up in the media to start the discussion, subjects that don't have a set date. So, but they're really important, like your succession, your insurance, all those sorts of little background bits that, you know, determine the viability of your business long term, but, you know, aren't linked to the weather, for example. So, you know, you can think of all those sorts of things. Proximity, where it's happening. So the rule of news is that it's more important if it's happening in someone's backyard. So the closer it is, the more important it is. So that explains why the under-9s local netball game doesn't make the ABC 7 p.m. news. It also explains, though, why it perhaps might get a double-page spread in your local community newspaper of photographs. Because people are going to know the people in the pictures. Their mum and dad might read them. Their grandma might read them, okay? It's very important to them. It's not important to anyone outside that little community. But if we're going to think about proximity and links to agriculture, I'd like to talk perhaps about the delay into the boat of sheep that was to leave WA in the last couple of months when the crew got tested positive to COVID-19. That happened in Western Australia, like it happened in Fremantle Port. It was, you know, mostly WA sheep. But the reality is, because it had a link to agriculture and had a link to people in, you know, sheep industry, it affects them. Okay, they take an interest in it. You know, all sorts of questions come up from that. You know, what does this mean for our market? What does this mean? Well, if it doesn't go, will these sheep come back onto the domestic market, for example? What about the health of the animals, the health of the crew? Will it, you know, will it affect future relationships with live export customers? You know, there's possible flow-ons, all those sorts of things. And, you know, that's just an example of something that is happening in WA, but can be made local. Like, so you could say to your members who happen to have sheep or whatever, you know, here's an update on this, and this is why it's important to you. It's important to you because sheep prices are here. If it comes onto the market, they might be here, or, you know, whatever types of communication you can do. But it's taking a national or, you know, international event and making it significant for your members or audience. Also, that one brought the idea of live export back into the spotlight. So you could, you know, you could even use a hook such as, you know, are your sheep or are your cattle ready for live export? You know, here's another, you know, if you're a vet, for example, and you're working on live, or if you're a live exporter, you know, here's another example of our really, really good health, welfare, all that sort of stuff on just to reinforce that we're doing the right thing now that, you know, the community is talking about live export. All right, we've got prominence. This is one of my favorites because it goes back to who's involved in it. Now, a lot of you guys are extension officers, and I work with extension in agriculture quite a bit in terms of communication, and they're always telling me, oh, farmers won't listen to us, or they won't listen to a scientist, they're only listening to each other. Right. This can work a treat if you want to communicate a message, because farmers listen to farmers, and generally the public listen to farmers too, although Danny explained that we're losing our credibility, but we'll work on that. you know, if a credible, mind you, it has to be a credible person, if a credible farmer has done something, used the product, it's more meaningful to your audience if you're trying to sell it or convince, you know, a farmer to change their ways or whatever, than if a researcher explains it. Because sometimes, you know, scientists, researchers talk up here, but, you know, your neighbour, you see him at the footy, you know exactly what he's doing. And if he's using it and having a really good result, you can see yourself in there. So, you know, the hook fundamentally could be that someone local is using it and they're like you. But then there's some information that's best delivered by a credible expert. So I'm just thinking, just off the top of my head, foot and mouth disease. If there's an outbreak of that in Australia, you don't want to hear about that from, you know, the bloke up the road who does a really good job growing ants heifers, for example. You want to hear that stuff from the chief vet, and you want updates from the chief vet because you know that they're the ones controlling the biosecurity. So I've got a screen with them all up there. And I've got a couple of questions at the bottom that can help you identify the hook. Keep in mind that a lot of these key screens will be available as PDF for you guys after the session, so you can go back and see them. So is it personally relatable? Does it affect my business? And could it help my business or life? All right. So now we get to do something. We're going to have a go at finding the hook. And it's not as fun online, so I'm already apologising for that. Normally, if you're in a group, you get in pairs and you have a chat. But what I'd like you to do is talk for 2 minutes with a partner about the start of this presentation. It could literally be that the speaker talked too much and raved on too much and didn't listen to anyone else. Or whatever you took out of it, I want you to tell your partner about it for 2 minutes. But I want you to keep in mind what you started with, what their reaction is to each part of the story. If you had only 1 minute, so your time is cut in half, would you be able to fit the important details in? And if you were to tell the story again, could you make it more engaging? So Meg is whiz bang with the Zoom technology, and she's going to put everybody in groups of 2, I think.
So welcome back, everyone. How did you go? Annie's got her hand up already. Annie, would you like to unmute yourself?
Yes.
No, that was just to say I'm back.
Okay.
Oh. Do you want to have a go at answering one of the questions, Annie?
No.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to pick on some people if that's okay. Katrina, what did you tell your partner first?
First up, I said about how I'd really enjoyed the great examples and went through some of those.
Okay. What was their reaction to that? Do you felt that they were engaged by that?
Yes.
Fabulous. If you were to get a chance to have a chat to your partner again, would you change the way you started it?
Possibly, but I will say that we actually couldn't see this screen when we first started our conversation.
Oh, okay.
So I was with Megan, and I think she already knew some of what was on that slide. So that probably when we did our room, that was the one thing that I was missing, was this slide.
Did you see it in the chat box, Kat? Or did that disappear for you too? Everybody else? Oh, did it?
Okay.
Kat, I did bring that up at the end, and I read through it, what did we tell them first. I just went through the list. I probably should have told you that's what I was doing.
Yeah, so the chat box is there. You just have to click on it. So sorry, everybody. You should actually have been able to see it in the breakout room.
Well, it didn't.
But anyway, that's okay.
That's okay. Thank you.
You've answered the question anyway.
Thank you for answering. I was going to pick on someone else. Is Stuart there? Does he want to tell me perhaps what he started with and why he maybe thought that was the hook?
Yep, I'm here.
Thanks.
What did I tell them first? Yeah, so I just sort of went around to say what I thought was good about the session so far and what I sort of got out of it. And I just started with that. And
did you like if you got a chance to have a chat again with your partner, would you change it? Maybe what you said to start with.
No, I don't think so. No, I don't think so. No, I don't think so.
So you took that. So yeah, did you happen to tell them why you thought you liked that bit? Because why will play into the hook quite a bit as well. Question without notice.
Say that question again. Sorry.
Oh, did you tell them why you liked a certain bit or didn't like it? You know, you said you liked a certain bit. Did you tell them why?
Yes, I did. I told them why because of what I do day to day and do a lot of business writing and communication. And what I liked about it was I do already apply a bit of strategy to what I do, but what I liked was that to set out some guidelines before you start writing anything to make sure then you read back over it, that you've got a hook in there, you've got a credibility thing in there. So if you can have a checklist and then you go through your checklist at the end and make sure that something in your story there that you've written or whatever you've written meets that criteria. Yeah.
So thank you, Stuart. That's great. The reason I asked him why is because did you see how he made that apply to himself? Like, this is part of my job. So, that's a way you can make it appeal to the person you're talking to. This could be part of your job, the why. All right. So we're going to go through the writing, which includes a lot of the whys, hows, whens, wheres, all that sort of stuff in a second. But now's the time to have a break. So if you want to drink or stretch, whatever, is it 5 minutes, Meg?
I think 5 minutes is good, everybody. So it's 12:01 here. So perhaps back at 12:05 or 12:06. And for those of you living in the past, what's that? 11:36. Back with us.
Ooh, harsh.
We'll see you then.
All right. Thank you.
And I should say, don't hang up. Just leave yourselves on mute and your cameras off. How are we going? We're all back? Put your hand up if you're not here. Haha. We might kick off, I think, Simone.
Alrighty.
How does that sound?
Okay, so this session is going to be focusing on writing. So basically with writing, it's going to give you the fundamentals for everything. So it's your social media posts, even your interviews, if you happen to be talking to reporters, video if you're going to do that. Like, this will give you the way to structure discussions, making sure you've got your hook and stuff at the top. So there is a homework task at the end. And remember, if you have any questions, just to pop something in the chat box and or unmute yourself and ask. I'm happy to answer as we go along. So, right, we'll start off here. This is inverted pyramid. It's taught to journalists right across the world. It's basically the how-to for writing a news story. There are other ways to do it, but this is basically the foolproof, back to basic way. It always delivers. I liken it to perhaps cooking your favourite dish. It will always work. It's bound to delight, sort of thing. So we've got the most newsworthy, important details, other general info. We're going to break that down as we go down the pyramid. So most newsworthy, the top. These are the juicy bits. So we've got the who, what, when, where, why, how. One of these, or a couple of them, could be a hook. As we were talking to Stuart beforehand about the why, the why could be a hook. Yeah. I can't stress enough that these elements do not have to be in the same sentence. I'd actually prefer if they aren't in the same sentence, because if they are, you look like you're starting a story or any sort of communication with a paragraph. And some people just turn off. It's just too much. Okay. Short, simple sentences. We're going to go through in the next few slides how to work in this stuff into short, simple sentences, easy to digest, nice to look at, that sort of thing. There, with the who, the what, the when, the where, why, where I've put in there, for example, it could be at Lucendale, it could be Fred and Julie Brown's farm, the local RSL. Nobody at the start of any form of communication is going to care or going to want to read something that says, for example, it's at 123 Brown Drive, Mount Gambier. Like, those sorts of details are further down the pyramid. Okay, so we don't need to include what I call the tiddly little bits that make the start of a story look clunky, ugly, and are giving too much information away. We want to be general. And when I want to draw people's attention to the when, I've used next month, next week, okay? So in the first part of any form of communication, you don't want to say 10 a.m. on August 30 at 123 Brown Drive, Mount Gambier. Like, that's too much for one sentence to begin with, but it's also, there's nothing that makes you want to read that. There's no hook, okay? So that's why, being a bit, generalized in what you're doing. And the why, again, is what's in it for them. If you're, with the where, if it's in Mount Gambier, 123 Brown Drive, Mount Gambier, you can say it's at Mount Gambier. If you're writing for further afield, it's in the southeast of South Australia, perhaps, okay? Be quite general. Credibility, the next part. This is where you can put the information about the event or the person. You add in a quote, talking about their importance or their experience, for example, like, for example, Julie, scientist, has worked at the CSIRO for a decade. She's published a paper on soil health. Julie says soil health underpins farm profitability. Our research has found X, Y, and Z. You will see this research as part of the field day. Or, it's backing up the why they should come. It's backing up how they can use it, all those sorts of things. So that's where, you can chuck your example of credibility in there. Okay, keep in mind too, that whenever you're writing anything, you want people to be able to get all the information in the first couple of lines, okay? But that doesn't mean everything needs to be squished into the first couple of lines, but you've got to write it as if an editor or someone at the community paper or whatever is going to chop from the bottom because there's not enough space, all right? We still want to get our message across. This is what I call the nuts and bolts, a bit more specifics. They've got clunky, ugly bits, I guess, that don't make reading a sentence look nice to the eye. These can be put in a box. They can be dot pointed. They are very important, but they're not your hook, okay? You know, even sponsors, sorry sponsors, but even sponsors can go in this section. You know, people generally don't necessarily come to something because it's sponsored by X, Y, and Z, okay? It's the, you know, the why. What are they going to get out of it that they want to know? Okay, we're going to go through incorporating the nuts and bolts in the layout section in a bit, but I just wanted to keep in mind the inverted pyramid. Okay, simple sentences, less is more when it comes to communication. Now, I've just made up some stories here just to put in a few examples. So the first sentence is, a leading weed researcher will share tips for controlling thistles at a heavily filled day next week. So we've got all our ingredients in there, like a cake, I guess. You know, the who, how, we've got the hook, controlling thistles. I might be at home, I might have thistles everywhere. I might need some tips on controlling them. For some people, the hook will be the fact that it's a leading weed researcher. They're fascinated by weeds, weeds impact their bottom line, you know, it could be anything, okay? We haven't got all the ingredients in there. Keep in mind, that's the first sentence. It's a very short, sharp sentence. Okay, the second line. This comes as the region has had one of the wettest autumns in the past 5 years, and farmers are battling to control weed outbreaks throughout the southeast. Okay, so we've still got all the ingredients there. We've doubled up on some of the ingredients. We've got the really important of why. So the why is bringing in the context. It's one of the wettest autumns, for example. You know, everybody can, you know, most people, I know weather can be patchy, but, you know, if it's wet, it's generally wet in the local area. And, you know, the hook and the currency, we've got their wettest, you know, autumns. It's happening now. This leading weed researcher is coming to town now. It's coming to Hatherley now. Also, the idea that battling to control weeds. Battling is a why. You know, why, what, you know, why would I go to this? Because this is something that I'm really struggling with. And back to, you might see yourself in it. You know, you might be like, oh, that's me. I've really had a hard time this year. Or, you know, I'm really wet. My weed problem might be to come. Or, you know, I might struggle to control it because it is so wet. I can't get on the paddocks. Like, you're asking people to see themselves in their family or something, their business, okay? So we've got two sentences, and those two sentences give you the understanding of what's actually happening. So if all you got were those two sentences, would you pretty much get the gist of what's going on? What's happening? Okay, the idea is we're right as if it would be chopped off, okay? So if we leave the key elements down to the bottom, we might not get them. All right, so that's an event, and in some respects, an event can be easier to do. But for those people who want a product, for example, or a service, same rules apply. You've got the same ingredients, it's just altering the method, like if you're making a cake. So keep using the cooking analogy. But, you know, we've got here a fixed time breeding program has lifted profits by 20% for one South Australian beef producer. So we're answering the question of, well, what? And to me, the hook is the fact that you've lifted profits by 20%. Keep in mind, guys, I've just made these up too, by the way. So, you know, it's not endorsing anything or, you know, anything. These are just fully fictional sentences for examples. I don't know anyone who wouldn't be keen to lift their profits by 20%. I don't know about you guys who work in extension, but yeah, it's pretty fundamental value. The fact that it's a South Australian beef producer, if you're writing this for a local newspaper or a local media release, or, you know, and it's a, you know, it's someone like them, you know, they're like, they know who it is. And even if you're in Victoria, you know who it is. You're a beef producer, or, you know, I've got sheep. I might be like, oh, a beef producer. Okay, well, does that work for me? I don't know how that works. Okay, so we're appealing again to people. All right. adding in a few more of the ingredients into a separate sentence though, so it's not all clunky at the top. So now we've got the Susie Brown. That's who it is. She's from Coongarong near Mount Gambier. Okay, I know where Mount Gambier is. I don't know where Coongarong is, but you know, it's near there. So she's used the artificial breeding technology. That's what it is. Ah, right. I thought I'd heard of it somewhere, or, you know, last year, because she was struggling to accurately identify heats for mating. So, you know, oh, that's something that happens to me. I struggle with identifying heats for mating, or, you know, my staff do, or my neighbour does, or my son or my daughter does, you know, whatever. Like, you know, it could be an issue that's affecting people. Again, you're telling the story further, but you're doing it one sentence at a time and including the ingredients. So if you were to cut it off now, you'd still get a gist of what was happening. All right. This is how we're putting a bit of a quote in. So after the company XYZ fertility field day, I asked my vet about breeding program options, and it was much simpler than I ever imagined, she said. Okay, so we're putting the how in. The how is the company field day. That's how she became aware of fixed time AI. Then she asked a vet about it, another how. And, you know, it was much simpler. So I did it. It was much simpler. Okay, so if you only had those first 3 lines, you'd be able to get the gist of what was going on. Similarly, if you had the first line, you'd have a bit of an idea, but you'd still have some questions. But fundamentally, you understand that fixed time AI pretty much lifts profits by 20%. Okay, so what we're trying to do is we're trying to be simple sentence structures, but using our juicy bits, so the hooks at the start, covering all our bases with the who, what, when, where, why, how, but not in the one sentence. Okay, I hope I've still got everybody with me. Here is an example of a press release from Citrus Australia. These are super simple sentences, but I'd like everybody, if possible, to read down to the end of it. But when they do, keep in mind all the things we've just talked about. So, you know, what's the call to action? What's the possible audience? Can you identify the hook? You know, where's the example of credibility? The who, the what, the where, the why, the when, the how. And yeah, so if we have a look, and then we'll just have a bit of a chat about it. So I'll give everybody, say, 30 seconds to a minute to read it, please. All right, how's the reading time going? All right. Does anyone want to have a stab at what the purpose of this communication is? So what's the call to action?
Happy to suggest Annie, sorry.
Yeah, that's right.
Basically, go and buy some citrus. It's a good time to buy it and get in there and get it, and great for the families too, parents.
Fabulous. Thanks, Annie. That's exactly right. And does any, you know, why it's a good time to buy it is because it's revealed Citrus Australia, so the credibility, the industry organisation, they should know about citrus if nobody else does, has revealed that dry conditions last year have led to the season's harvest, like, you know, it's better flavour profiles. So not only go and buy it, but go and buy it now because it's better than it has been, basically. So what do you think the hook is? Like, do you think that they've got the hook right? Anyone?
Hi, it's Freya here.
Yeah.
I think the hook would be they talk about all the benefits, you know, the vitamin C, boosting immunity, antioxidants, so about improving people's health maybe?
Yeah, that's a really good idea. Health can always go up there with hook, because at the end of the day, if you cook, takes time off work, you know, it can be expensive, all that sort of stuff. Okay, so it comes back. So great, very good point. Yep. So what I particularly like, so this press release has all the ingredients and it's also written really simply. So if it happened to be chopped off after the first sentence, you'd sort of still know what was going on. If it was chopped off halfway, you know, yeah, you'd have heaps more information, but you'd still know what was going on. But the bit that I particularly like, and I think can be applicable for those in extension when it comes to communication. And personally, I'd maybe put it a little bit higher in the press release, but I like the fact it's included in this one, is that not only is there a call to action, so the media release tells you what you should do, tells consumers what they should do on behalf of the citrus industry. And then it tells them how to do it, which is even better. So the last line here says, add them to your weekly shop. It is great for the fruit bowl or fridge at this time of year. So it's not only giving you instructions on what to do, it's how to do it. So pretty much ticks all those boxes. All right. Let's move on to this one. All right. This is a media release from wool producers. I've got some questions next to it, and I'd like you to consider those questions when you read the press release, please. You know, what was right? What have they done? You know, what's their call to action? And keep in mind what would happen if only the first 3 paragraphs or so was actually included in a newspaper. Would you get the full impression? So I'll give everybody a minute or so to read that, if that's okay.
I'll set the timer, Simone, and I'll let you know when it's been a minute, and we can give you a bit more time if you need longer.
Thank you.
That's a minute up, but I haven't quite finished reading through it yet, so I'm going to give you a bit longer. Okay, that's been about 2 minutes, so hopefully you've all finished reading.
All right, guys, I'm going to pick on a couple of people if that's okay. Freya, for you, what was the most striking part of that story?
I guess it was talking about how much COVID-19 has actually affected the bottom line of wool growers.
Fabulous, thank you. Can anyone tell me what Wool Producers has actually done?
Sorry. They're like putting in policy requests and first they did the survey as well to help understand the situation.
Yep.
And then, yeah, like in the other media release, they're actually going to the government with requests.
Okay, thanks. That's Bonnie. Yep, thank you, Bonnie. yeah, so I guess that covers off with how they're helping wool growers too. Just bear in mind what would happen if, like I said at the start, we only included the first 3 or 4 paragraphs of that story. Do you think we would get all those messages that Freya and Bonnie just explained? Do you think that would be clear? I think the story, or the press release, sorry, it's like cake. It had all the ingredients there. We just could rework the method a little bit. There's a term in journalism, news reporting, that you bury the lead. So you begin the story with, you know, what's on the screen. You can read it, but otherwise known as missing the point. So I've had a go at rewriting this, and we'll have a look at that. Like, I want to stress, everything was there, just could have made it look that little bit more hook. Okay, so if we want to take a minute, I've had a go at rewriting the same press release, same information. I haven't called them or anything, I just took it off that.
Instantly more readable, positive aspect on it as well, and it makes you want to read the whole thing.
Thanks, Annie. Yeah, and I've got to keep in mind that if you got chopped off, you still need to get your message across.
Exactly.
I purposely put, and I'd love to have some agricultural input on this one, but I purposely put that they had sought federal government assistance in the first line, because Australian agriculture is famous because of its lack of support from government. Like, you know, we go at our own ways. And to me, the fact that they've done that indicates that it's serious enough because the situation is serious enough, but also that, you know, they are breaking the mold. Like, you know, we're in this situation. I'm just wondering any other agricultural people, what their thoughts about that is.
We might call on somebody else in the farming industry to tell
What
us
about
what they
Tim?
think about it.
Yeah, I personally often wonder about that sort of thing, because I don't see a lot of requests and needs of farmers actually getting worried about by politicians.
Yeah, okay.
So I read the first line of that and go, oh, another one, whatever.
Okay, that's interesting. Interesting. All right. Well, I've highlighted a few different things. So, you know, the hook for Tim perhaps isn't the same as me, but that's okay. There's no right, there's no wrong, there's nothing like that. But I took the hook to be that they've gone for federal government assistance in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. The credibility, the fact that they've done a survey of its members, and basically the proof is that it's revealed widespread financial losses. Now, with Tim's points in mind, we could have started with the widespread financial losses at the start. You know, there's a number of different ways to, what's the saying, skin a cat. So also, what does everybody think about the idea of getting rid of the brackets in the first line? To me, brackets indicates a clunky sentence to look at visually. Also, if you didn't know what Wool Producers Australia was, you might not know how they operated, but the Australia's People Grower Lobby Group. There's a number of different ways to explain things. I've also put in the survey there and the statistics. Oh, Darren. Yep, do you have a question?
Oh, just a comment, Simone, probably supporting that. It seemed to be an internal marketing message that the organisation is actually doing something for its members.
Yes,
so
yes.
It appeared to me not to be a press release that went out to a broader audience.
Yes, but you're also, the same thing applies regardless of who you send it to.
To be critical, it says absolutely nothing.
Yeah, true. And as Tim pointed out, you know, if you go to the government, you'll probably get ignored anyway. But if you're sending this to your members, you're sending it to the press, and keep in mind too, and that's probably a good lesson, if you send something to the members, it can also go to the press, because I ended up with it. is that, you know, whatever you send out can go anywhere. But yeah, you're right. It doesn't really say a lot, but it's again reinforcing the fact that they're actually doing something for their members. Okay, they've chucked in a statistic to give it credibility. Okay, you could argue whether it has credibility or not, or surveying your own members has not credibility or not, you know, whatever. But the point is they're adding to it the perceived credibility, the perceived that. I've also dot pointed the last few points simply because it sums it up, you know, what they've asked for in the short term, what they've asked for in the medium term. And you can be like Darren and read it and be like, I feel like I've learned nothing, which is totally fair enough because, you know, these things, you know, support services, well, what are they? You know, including more effective communication. What are they? Right. Ideally, what you would do is you'd flesh it out that little bit more with that extra bit of information, but I just went off with the communication that came through and rewrote it. If you wanted this to go further afield, there's also the opportunity to explain perhaps why wool is impacted differently to other agricultural, you know, because, you know, we heard at the start, you know, farmers have got your back when it comes to the COVID-19 pandemic. But, you know, wool cuts in a different situation. But, you know, a metro journalist, for example, or even, you know, one in a big town or with no agricultural links might not understand how that works. And I, to basically prove this point, I've got to, I'm going to tell you a story. I'll be pretty quick, but I once worked with a journalist who didn't know anything about agriculture, but was convinced that sheep who produce wool didn't do anything else. And basically when they died, they were buried on the farm. And she had believed this for a very long time. And so did her husband, actually. So, you know, everybody's understanding of agriculture is different. So if you want this greater pickup or greater understanding or to simplify it, to get the message through, you've got to explain that, you know, not every aspect of agriculture is affected in the same way. Like people didn't go out and panic buy jumpers, for example, or, you know, merino underlays or anything like that. So it's about explaining it to a different member. That could be a way to make it stronger. All right. So clear is kind. So just an example about how people don't understand. I took this doozy off Twitter recently. We're going to have to use our imagination about what's behind the blue. But the tweet is in relation to the amount of international arrivals that are allowed into Australia because of COVID-19. Yeah, so clear as kind, my friends. The numbers were slashed in half, not the people. All right, if we're adding to clarity, layout can help. This is a press release we referred to earlier that had a please don't do this element to it. Okay, this has a graphic attached to it. Okay, it was at the top of the press release. It's very clear. It shows exactly what you should be doing to needle sheep. Okay, so combined with the story saying, you know, don't needle yourself basically, and go to the doctor with the thing. It works very well as educational piece of communication. But, you know, layout can work in different ways. We've talked about the numbers in the PETA release, you know, dot points, fact sheets, pictures. I've got an example here. This is a press release I did a few months back. It was about hay curing when things were quite wet. Like it's quoting an APHIA director, so he's a director of a national body, so there's a bit of credibility there. But then you've also got that he's a 50-year veteran of the hay industry. So, you know, if you were reading that, you would say, oh, well, okay, so you would hope that he would know what he was talking about. And it's a lot of his tips. I've used the word tips to just make it that little bit casual. No one wants to be told what to do by other farmer, but, you know, you get the odd tip, for example. So you've got those few dot points. So if you don't take home anything, you might take home that. Those few extra little bit tips. The tips reinforce the media release, the call to action, and they're easy to consume. Is it relevant? Relevance is something that's only noticed when it's wrong. It's not something that's front of mind all the time. So no one wants to attend a field day on growing wheat, for example, in the middle of harvest. Can't fit it in for starters, but you know it's taking into consideration everything around you. And I know that I could be telling some of you guys how it's the sort of thought process you need to start doing when you're doing communication. Targeting to your audience is another one, like succession planning. You know, a lot of that gets targeted at the older generation, but really when you think about it, sometimes the younger ones have more to gain from a succession plan. And they have that, they have that hunger, I guess, to get the ball rolling when it comes to succession planning. So have a think about where you might want to target that sort of communication. You know, simply understanding. There's no point talking high level information to people that don't understand it. So if you've got information that's probably best suited for, you know, your agronomists, nutritionists, you know, your experts, and you know there's some farmers that aren't at that level, don't broadcast it out everywhere. Okay, it's the same as the pitch. Know who you're pitching it to. Develop that level of understanding. I have actually seen science communication broadcast out to a large audience, so farmers had seen it, it had come in it. When the actual extension person got around to talking to them with it, some of them didn't want to bar. They either saw it initially and went, oh, I don't understand. I don't want to bar, or it's too complicated for me, or that doesn't apply for me because I milk X, Y, and Z cows, or whatever it is. Okay, so if you've got your understanding of your audience, it's relevant. Sorry, your audience, your understanding, your pitch, for example. If you have that planned out, you don't run into those sorts of issues. Okay. With agriculture, just a few examples of things you can consider. You know, markets bring a lot of relevance to it. Up, down, stable, forecasting, weather, you know, things are relevant from one year, they may not be to the other, you know, who does what and where, you know, just for a really stupid example, don't, you know, there's no point even talking about cotton, for example. So if you're selling cotton wrap for bales of cotton, don't even bother talking about it anywhere, you know. South, just, you know, what's happening on farm now, keep in mind, you know, that's applicable for everything. Okay, this is a big one, and this I'm using one of my recent errors to prove my point here. If you don't know anything about this topic, does it make sense? Now, I recently wrote a thing about a New Holland baler, and I sent it to a number of the different people who had trialled the baler just to see what they thought. And one of the wife of one of the guys I interviewed, she phoned me back, I'm sorry. And she said to me, I don't know anything about farming, but I'm so impressed that the New Holland baler actually bales wool. And I was like, oh, no, it doesn't. But I can see, if you're reading it on the screen, how she might have got that impression. Now, she did say she didn't know anything about agriculture. I took it as granted that, you know, of course they don't bale wool. They bale hay. But, you know, this is new technology. She didn't understand. And this is a direct quote from Greg, like, you know, exactly how he said it. Okay. But it was really a reminder to me that hit home that everybody doesn't understand everything. Okay. So the good thing about being able to go back to Greg is I said, Greg, and I rang him up and I told him this super embarrassing story. And I said, do you mind if we add a couple of words in? And he's like, sure, no worries. So just, you know, introduction of putting that when they bale hay in makes the sentence much more clearer for those that don't understand. So what I'm trying to get at now is that jargon isn't your friend. Everybody doesn't always have the same understanding. And when you get confusion, that's where disinterest pops in. So if I don't understand it or I'm not clear, I'll just push that to the side and I didn't take on anything that was just said, okay? So not everybody always knows what you're talking about. There's a few extra tips and tricks here. So I call it the drink bottle test, but you can pretty much do it with anything, right? So I've got a drink bottle here. What else can we refer it to? You know, it's a water vessel, it's a, you know, quenches my thirst, you know, it's tin. So we don't want to use, and this is a way to vary up, I guess, your stories. You don't necessarily need to use the same word over and over again. Like, you know, it's a phone, it's a mobile, it's also a phone. Okay, that's a real simple way to go about it. Don't complicate it though. Don't refer to it as, you know, a handheld communication device or, you know, whatever that is, because frankly, you're adding words to your story, but words that are unnecessary. But where there's an opportunity to refer to something slightly different, you can. That way people aren't reading repetitive stuff. I was always told as a cadet journalist that the quality of this story is determined by what's on the cutting room floor. So if you've got good stuff left over, chances are you've got really good stuff still in your story, okay? And just because you've got all this information, you might have gone to a field day and you're writing up a report for your members, for example. You might have reams and reams and reams and reams of copy. You don't have to include it, everything. Just because you've written it down doesn't mean it has to be included, okay? You go back to your purpose of your communication, your hook, your audience, you know, examples of credibility. Go back to your inverted pyramid, what's included in the writing, okay? You don't have to include it all just because you've got it. And you yourselves are experts in your field, and you know your subjects, and you know, or on the radio or the TV, you're writing about what you do as a living, or what you have to show to people, or what you've researched, or what a colleague has done, or, you know, you can add that context or background that might not be in that notebook, you know, that might not have come. Like you might know something, that little bit extra that you can add to it, or you might know that, for example, if we go back to the example of the weeds at the Hatherley Field Day, you might know that there's a patch of the region, so over your road, just for example, that, you know, didn't get rain. So you might be able to add that in down further in the story, okay? So, you know, don't discount yourself and your own knowledge. The last one is pretty much, it's about keeping things consistent, but it's about developing, I guess, a style for your communication. So is it 6 the number or is it 6 the word? How are you going to put in 26 into a story? Doesn't really matter how you do it, as long as you keep it consistent. I spent most of my career working at the Weekly Times, and we had a style that involved, if it was under 10, we would write the number out. If it was over 10, it would be the number, okay? But I know that, you know, whatever you choose, keep it consistent. And it's the same as, you know, do you refer to people as their last name? Do you, you know, you can't be like, Mr. Fred Brown did X, Y, and Z. Fred did this. Mr. Brown did that. You know, oh, Boof, because that's what he's known as by a nickname, did this or said this. Like, keep it consistent. It's, you don't want your audience guessing. You don't want to bring uncertainty in, confusion in, nothing like that. It takes away from your message, your purpose of your communication. All right, proofing. We're on the home straight, I promise you guys. These are some tips which I've learned along the way. Sometimes I've learned them the hard way, and I'm not joking when I actually have a picture of a kid reading to a dog, because the key to proofing is to read something out loud. And I know it's painstaking to actually read it backwards. Doesn't make sense, but what you're doing is when you start at the bottom, you're reading every single word that's there, not what you think should be there. If you've written it, I do it all the time myself. If I've written it, I know what should be there. I've written it. But if you read every single word by reading it backwards, you'll pick up the that's and the ands and the ifs, or just the little things, or the double words, or whatever that shouldn't be there. Get the same from reading out loud, but again, sometimes you read what should be there, not what is. And then I would like everybody to take a look at the entire page, or the entire newsletter, or whatever it is you're putting out. If possible, print it out. And I'm sure a lot of people here would do newsletters. So email newsletters are a really good example. Like, they look different on your phone to how they look on, you know, one sort of screen versus another sort of screen, and even in your inbox. Like, check it on every level. What does it look like? Look at the whole thing. Do the photos match the caption? Do the photos match the story? Like, so often that doesn't happen. You know, are the correct numbers at the bottom? Are the contact numbers correct at the bottom? You know, is the email right? Is it timely? All those sorts of things. And I hate to break it to you, spell check isn't always your friend. And I've always worked in software for newspapers, so we've never had spell check. It's never been a thing. So you have to go through and look at every single word. Whereas now I'm working in the Microsoft programs, spell check doesn't always pick up what you actually mean. So keep all those things in mind. Now, there is some homework coming. I'll send it to you, and you also get my email so that you can ask any questions if you want. Here are some hastily put together details about a silage field day in the southeast of South Australia. I've plugged them all together. No real method to the madness. Just a whole bunch of different details that might come across your desk, and you have to communicate this in a media release. This media release is going to go out to the media, obviously, but it will go to your members of your organisation or whatever. I want you to keep in mind, and you'll get the slides that will jog your memory for all of this. So what's your purpose? What's your hook? What's your audience? How can we get all the details at the top in case it's chopped off? What's the most important stuff? Where's the example of the credibility? All of the things we've practiced today, if we could include, please, into a media release. Now, I've just put in random words, so you know, you guys are agricultural experts. You'll probably think, oh, what silly quotes. But the reality is sometimes you've got to work with what you're given. Ideally, you'd go back and go, oh, this isn't a strong quote or whatever, but I've given you this information to turn around into a media release. Now, if it's okay, our next session is in a fortnight. I was wondering if it was possible if you could turn, maybe email this to me within a week. So by next Tuesday, I will go through each one, send back some edits and some suggestions and things to each person so they've got something to work with. So don't worry about writing all this down. You'll get it on your email. Okay, so we've come to the end. We've covered a lot of ground, but I think the purpose, the audience, and the fundamentals of writing is going to set us up for the rest of the course. So, you know, it's applicable to interviews, it's applicable to social media, it's applicable to anything you do, all the things we've covered today. So next session, we're going to be looking at smartphone photography and social media. So with the social media particularly, we'll be employing a lot of the skills we've learned today and principles we've learned today. So yeah, don't hesitate to get in touch. My details are at the top. And if you've got any questions, the worksheets will come out with all that on there.
Thank you very much, everybody, and we will see you in a couple of weeks' time.